Hey guys, I know it's been a while since I've posted a video. I am so sorry. I've been crazy busy, and also just this time of year, I feel like it just takes me forever to do everything. So even if I wasn't that busy, I think it would be really difficult for me to keep up my normal posting schedule. But, anyways, I hope everyone is doing well. I wanted to share this sort of process video, and I'll also show a little sped up portion of it so you can see what it looks like sped up later. But I wanted to share this process with you guys because I've been doing a lot of these and it's kind of like my new favorite thing. Misty landscapes or foggy landscapes, which is so super appropriate right now for this time of year in Scotland. Everywhere I look, there's fog and like thick mist hanging in the fields. It's just awesome. So it's been just something that I've been loving painting lately, and I wanted to get better at it so that when I go out plein air painting, I don't struggle quite as much. So I've been experimenting a lot in the studio. And if you guys didn't know, my Patreons this month are getting little mini versions of this. So little postcard size, hand painted, foggy landscapes. And it's been so much fun to paint those. So basically what I do, I start off by laying in some clear water sort of near the top of the painting for the sky, and then somewhere along the middle or right below the middle of the painting for where I want the sort of fog to be thick and hanging over the field. And you can vary the thickness of your water line, so you can just have like a thin stripe, or you can have a big blob of water. Just depends on like how foggy you want it to be. I'm using Arches paper, which is very absorbent and it holds the water for a long time. So I had plenty of time to play around. So I actually didn't put down too much clear water in this one first. You can see I'm like tilting it upwards and kind of moving it, tilting it around to kind of get the water to flow in the direction I want. And that just helps me kind of have some form of control, even though basically the whole point of this is like letting go of control. You're just here to sort of influence it. You're, designing the composition overall and the colors, but really you just need to be able to let go and let the watercolor do its thing. And once I put down that clear water, I start touching in the paint. And from the top of the painting, I start with like more muted blues and purples and black or gray tones, shifting down into like a dark blue-green color. Because if you think about it, the fog is hanging in the valley and it's kind of creating a shadow. So any kind of sun or even like hazy sun that's coming down is sort of blocked out right below the fog. So that area should be a little bit more bluish or like a dark green. Then sort of lower than that, I start putting in my green gold color, which is a bright green. And that sort of tricks the viewer into seeing like, okay, sun or some form of light is hitting the landscape. And you can see here it's like drawing with a hard line like below where I have the fogginess. So because it's Arches and I have plenty of time to play around with it, I can go back in with my smaller brush and I can start like drawing lines that lead in and out of that fogginess, which you'll see here shortly. And that allows me to sort of play with the perspective or realism. So I can draw like my stone walls that you see all over Scotland, like kind of dividing the farmlands. I can draw those with like a dark green color or whatever color I want really, and start playing around with like that mosaic, that composition of the farmland. And it can lead in and out of the fogginess because that's still wet. I have time to play with that. My lines won't be like completely rigid or hard lines throughout the whole thing. As they go in and out of that wet area, they're going to sort of like fade off into the distance. So that's what I mean by playing with the perspective. But it's really easy at this point to like to overdo it, to overwork it. So you have to just like sort of hold back. And that is to me the hardest thing about doing this kind of painting. It's easy to do a more realistic because you have something to work from. Like you have either you're painting from real life or you're painting from a photo and you can just copy it till it looks real. But when you're doing something like this that's like super spontaneous and very more impressionist style, knowing when to stop is like half the battle. So I say just go slow, just do little by little. At this point you'll see I'm like majorly slowing down. And I'm kind of like dotting in some little shadow colors for trees that kind of line the farmland. A lot of times in Scotland you see like the stone walls creating a mosaic everywhere, but then there's also like trees and shrubs and stuff along those lines. So just like here and there putting little patches of trees, but still going very slow so that I don't end up overdoing it. I recommend doing several of these. Just be aware that like you might not get it right the first time. I had to do like 30 of these before I really started to figure it out. And you're probably going to have a different style than I do. So like I just suggest getting some loose sheets of paper or even little postcard size papers and trying as many as you can, place the water in different areas, use different amounts of water and pigment, and just see what starts to work for you. And have fun playing around with different compositions too. And as this started to dry, I saw that the foggy area that's hanging in the valley had kind of a hard line near the top. And sometimes that bothers me, like the way that it blooms and then like gets like a really dark edge along the bloom. And sometimes I love it. And in this case, I actually loved it because it made the fogginess feel heavier, and I was able to play with like the landscape moving in and out of it at the bottom really softly, but then it had like a hard edge at the top, which isn't to me a nice contrast. But I did realize like I wanted to have the mountains in the distance and the hills in the distance a little more obvious. So it was still a little wet up there, but I wanted to use mostly a dry brush so that I could get some texture and sort of break up that softness near the top. So I went back in with a dry brush and played around with like just some light purple, light bluish tones and created like a little bit of an edge at the top of the hills. And here you actually see me picking up little fuzzies that get into the water. It just happens occasionally, and I'm usually fine with it but in this case there were like 2 or 3 like right in the middle, and I was like, no, not okay. But yeah, anyways. It's a fast process overall, and it might almost feel like, okay, is that it? Like, that seemed really fast, and I mean, I can't be done already, can I? Like, that happens to me all the time when I'm doing these types of landscapes, but it's like a time isn't an indication of whether a painting is good or not. If you can get a painting if you can finish a beautiful painting in 3 brush strokes, that's amazing. That's like what masters can do. If it takes you 15 hours, that's fine too. But like, don't feel like just because something is fast and really loose that you're doing it wrong or that it can't be done, because that sometimes leads you to overworking it again. So yeah, just want to encourage you guys to just keep experimenting and playing around with different amounts of water, different amounts of pigment especially, and different colors will bleed differently too and like sit differently in the paper. So it sounds like I'm not really giving much advice when I'm like saying just gotta try it, go practice, but it's true. Like, everyone's paper is different and brush style is different, and yeah, so hopefully that this video kind of showed you a little bit of my process and my rambling helped in some way. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And as always, my patrons have the bonus of coming into my live streams and asking questions and critiques on something you're working on. And that's just like one of the little benefits that I started doing lately. So yeah, feel free to stop by and ask questions or send me a PM if you're more comfortable that way. And otherwise, hope you guys are inspired to keep painting and trying new things. I'm going to show you a quick time lapse of this after I'm done with my brush work, so you can see what it looks like when it's sped up, because I think it's really fascinating to see how the colors bleed and blend into each other, and I think it's actually really useful to see that too. All right, I'm going to stop rambling now. See you guys next time.